Well, hey folks, it's your old pal, King Waspinator. Welcome back to Total Party Skills. Be sure to hit like and subscribe and all that algorithmically good fun. Joined tonight by Lady Waspinator because I wanted to talk about everyone's favorite subject, which is consent rules in role-playing games for tabletop environments. A few role-playing game companies have started to do the tepid first steps of introducing consent rules into their actual physical, game products. And lately, there's been a lot of buzz on Twitter and probably other places online amongst the youths who seem to think that if everyone had their own consent forms and got everyone else to sign their consent forms, then they're going to be able to have an amazing time having fantasy adventures in a Dungeons and Dragons or other role-playing game environment. Lady Waspinator here was kind enough to look up and see actually what was on some of these consent forms, so we weren't just like conjecturing what all was there. And so, what kind of stuff did you discover that you find off-putting?
I find the entire concept a bit off-putting, but maybe not for the same reasons that you do.
Mm-hmm.
It does make gameplay a lot more difficult. First of all, these forms are very long, and to sit there and go through them all. I'm assuming people aren't checking off every box. I don't want spiders or depression or any mention of cancer. And definitely no off-the-shoulder nudity among non-player characters. That's disgusting.
Yeah, non-shoulder nudity and something that is entirely in your imagination is pretty offensive, and I'm shocked. The first one you showed me, I thought it was funny that, like, on it had a thing that I myself have always employed, which is just in whatever session 0, or you're just putting out your advertisement of what you want people to come play, because you don't just say, hey, I'm going to run a role-playing game and say nothing. You're generally going to say, I'm going to run this game, and it's going to be about this, and I need this many players, yada, yada, yada. And so I would typically just kind of just use the American film and television rating system. Is this going to be a PG, a PG-13, a PG? Is it going to be R-rated? Is it going to be NC-17? Is it going to be rated X? Other countries have other versions of that, so like it doesn't, wherever you are, you have an easy-to-go reference that everyone in your player group should already kind of understand, so they can have some idea that, like, oh, this is rated R. You can even include that it's rated R for violence, or if someone's smoking cigarettes, or, sexual innuendo.
But so in a sense, you've already been doing that.
Yeah, I just haven't...
And a responsible DM is going to also do that.
It's with a lot of these things that are becoming controversies in gaming, it's not so much that the thing being proposed in and of itself is some sort of bad idea, and even as like something that you had said earlier when we were first talking about this, in some ways the disclosure agreement, the consent agreement forms kind of can also give you protection from other people doing weird shit and accusing you of doing something, and then you can like, no, you said this was okay. But on the other end, that could also be a way to provide people cover to get away with doing things that could be construed as abusive. And then just saying they're like, yeah, but you told me I could do it, kind of thing, because you signed the form. It cuts both ways. I feel it's unnecessary, and the sheer amount of things that were on there, some of which, like, why is all this sex stuff even coming up? and like, what kind of role-playing games are y'all playing out there? I'm jealous. Like these are ostensibly still supposed to be things that kids should play, so like I don't know why we need to have a fetishist's non-disclosure agreement. Like, this is 50 Shades of Grey, and you need to like let us know, in between, having combat with goblins, how much wax you want dribbled on your back while you're tied up to a T-cross thing in my basement. That's not supposed to, like I don't know what you're doing, but you're role-playing wrong. Part of me, I saw some snide Twitter. It's what kind of got me started on this tangent. I don't want to make this video right now, but I saw someone on Twitter who had made a comment that was like, anyone who makes fun of RPG safety rules, the safety rules are working already, because then that, they're not a safe person you want to play with, and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, yeah, if you're persistent and don't take no for an answer, eventually your players will be forced to agree to use the consent rules. And guilt and social pressure is a great technique in order to be able to convince impressionable young people to do as you tell them to do, whether or not they might have misgivings. like, how are you supposed to write adventures where you're having to constantly second guess every little NPC decision you make, especially when you're doing so much of it on the fly, reacting to players?
I mean, also that's a whole problem with consent in this type of thing to begin with. It's not real. You know it's not real.
What? It's not real? I wasn't really fighting a dragon in Narnia with all my best friends as elven rangers from Shangri-La. I mean, what?
I am a person who very strongly anthropomorphizes my character.
Yeah, a lot of people do. They can't help it.
And I'm not comfortable when a lot of things happen. Even things that most people are very comfortable with. You're walking down the road and you see something up ahead. Oh my God.
What is it?
That makes me really uncomfortable.
It's going to kill my character.
So if you asked me every time, are you okay with this?
Yeah.
A lot of times I'm going to be like, no, I want to go home and eat soup.
There's a lot of stuff that's like unclear also, like who exactly are the DMs supposed to be handing out the consent forms to the players, or is this for the players to get the DM to sign to make sure that the DM has been vetted somehow by their willingness to play along with this? I know on like I said, on some levels it's not like this is entirely outside of what can be described as reasonable. So there is a degree where trying to take a hard line no stance on consent forms is kind of being unreasonable. But if you aren't willing to ever draw that line somewhere, eventually the tide's going to erase your sandcastle, and there's nothing you can do about it unless you actually like put a wall up around it to protect it from the tide.
Like you're saying though, you're getting consent when you describe the game to them and tell them what's going to happen and give it a rating.
One of my followers on Twitter, who's a lawyer, had commented on some of my tweets about this, that, whereas this sort of stuff certainly wouldn't be ironclad in a court system. Like, you might think you might be able to use this to protect yourself from something that happens in a role-playing game if someone claims mental abuse, but it's not like an actual honest-to-God, notarized contract or anything. It's just as valid as me writing a contract off on a piece of note paper with someone when they're drunk.
It makes people feel more comfortable.
Also, there's this thing that about humanity that people seem to forget in terms of like a lot of the stuff on, especially since like a lot of the consent lines were like not just yes or no, but like a gradient of yes to no. That reminded me of those kinds of psychological tests they give people who are looking for employment. I don't know how to tell people this, but human beings can lie. Ta-da! Like, they could give you all the right answers on that consent form and still, like, actually not abide and feel held or bound to be obligated to follow any of that. It's just a piece of paper. And, since you're already telling people ahead of time what the game is and what it's going to be like and what level of graphicness and all that kind of stuff, by attending, you're already consenting. It'd be like if you went to go see The Matrix Resurrections in theaters right now. Check Ticketmaster to get tickets online.
It's Fandango now, but sure.
Or whatever. Like, people want to see The Matrix Resurrections. I'm the only person who liked it. And I spent most of my time complaining about it, too. But I like complaining about things. Where was I?
Consent forms.
Yeah, what if The Matrix Resurrections, not only do you have to buy your ticket and go into the movie theater and willingly sit down and watch it and stay the whole time, because you're also, you can pick up and leave at any point you feel like you're offended by this movie. But what if it also wanted you to sign a consent form? I mean, it wouldn't harm you, but like, why is that necessary? You've already consented by being there, so why do you need the paper trail?
I mean, sure, if you're doing something really awful. And that was one of the first things you said when we first discovered this in the Dune book, is that they're assuming the absolute worst.
Yeah.
The absolute worst.
Well, you'd ask me if a player asked me to sign a consent form, would I do it, or not allow them to play? And whereas, like I said, like on some level it is a little unreasonable to be completely hard line about this sort of thing. On the other hand, that's kind of insulting because, you know, you're coming into my house and then just handing me this thing that's assuming that I'm going to be molesting your character and exposing you to fictional cancer and fictional gaslighting. Oh, that was one of like my favorite thing that was on there was that fictional gaslight, like. That so much can be swept underneath that. You know, a thing that game masters have to do while running their adventures is use misdirection. Where, you know, like if you want characters to be able to fall for a puzzle or fall for a mystery or fall for a trap so they can then enjoy the adventure of overcoming this thing or figuring it out, well, that requires you doing things that fall under the umbrella of gaslighting. So, like, what kind of miserable... You know, what if you have to consent to harming animals, you have to consent to harming people, you have to consent to fictional nudity, fictional sex. Like I said, there's like too much sex stuff on here. Like, this should not be involved in these things. Like, these are, you know, you might be adults playing with adults, but this is still a fucking kids game. If you're sitting around playing Monopoly with your family, or are you sitting around playing Monopoly with like adults, with your fucking dicks out, just wanking it, moving your little thimble guy around? No. Like everyone really, if everyone, all sides, all that shit, like, I feel like if I have a message, it's that everyone needs to grow the fuck up and chill out a little bit about all this shit. It just, to me, it seems like a red flag. If someone was running a game and they wanted me to sign a bunch of paperwork agreeing to consent to things, that would make me wonder, like, what the fuck's going on in your game. That seems kind of like what exactly are you planning on doing here?
It's weird that companies seem to think that we've become so uncivil and unable to actually communicate with one another that we need a form.
Yeah. I mean, and yet, you know, like, I can remember back to, like, especially when I was younger in my 90s. I mean, not in my 90s, in the 90s. And, like, you know, I've personally been witness to some pretty awful behavior from people, especially, like, in the gaming community, from DMs and players alike, like, I feel sorry for, like, you know, girl players in the 90s sometimes of being dropped into these environments and the kind of weird jockeying and the way they'd be passed up the hierarchy. The DM always has to have the girlfriend kind of shit. The way being a DM kind of automatically gives you this temptation. It's real easy to develop a little personal cult of personality out of your players who all become very loyal and will bring you presents and gifts and all this kind of shit and want to curry favor with you, so you'll treat them nice and give them presents in the forms of cool stuff happening to their characters. And, you know, you need to, when you catch yourself falling into those kinds of things, you need to try to give yourself a little mental distance from that, because we don't need to be tyrants. And if we want people to take us seriously and feel safe playing these games and not make everyone jump through hoops, you know, then we need to be honest about the fact that, like, these things can happen and have happened in the past, but they shouldn't reflect on the entire fucking game. Human beings still have agency. I thought, like, at least I'm assuming that, you know.
Yeah, you can just say, hey, whoa, I'm not comfortable with that.
And, like, also...
You can also leave.
Akin to the people can lie, you know, there are people who will take advantage of this.
Yeah.
Like I said, they can use the consent form to cover for them getting away with poking at doing things that they probably otherwise wouldn't be doing. But hey, you said I can have, you know, fictional NPC, your character's knocked up now, you check the box, you said you'd be okay with it. And, you know, it's something you were saying about, like, you know, like, since Dune introduced the thing where you're supposed to have dice or something that indicates your tension level, well, you would always have yours dialed in at 4.
Yeah.
Kind of a thing.
Yeah.
Also, I could see, like, people with a sadistic
orange
streak, like, if you have this thing on the table, you want to see it being used. So I can see there should be some game masters out there who'd be purposely trying to get their players to dial that thing up all the way to maximum just to see it happen.
Yeah.
You know,
and like you've said, it causes a lot of second guessing on the part of the player, who normally says, yes, I'm here for this game, let's go, what do you got for me? And now every single thing that happens, am I comfortable with this? How comfortable am I with this? you know,
I need you to roll initiative, but are you okay with this?
It doesn't.
The goblin's
In
going to
a lot
attack
of
you,
these
but are you
situations,
okay?
it doesn't matter how comfortable you are. Your character is going to go through this shit, and you are going to go through it.
This adventure module says
With
you have to
them.
fight the guy in this cave, but are you okay with going into a cave? Is that going to give you bad childhood memories of claustrophobia?
Right. Yeah. Second guess.
Are you going to like be worried about what if
I
someone
don't know.
else?
Am I? I hadn't thought about it before.
What if
but
someone else that's not even here could hypothetically have been offended by you having to go into that cave?
I'm actually just not super comfortable in cold places, and all this description of snow is kind of bothering me. So can we just change the setting to like not mountains?
I could just completely erase all of my plans that I told you about ahead of time before you said you'd come and show up today.
But I feel uncomfortable, and
I don't want you to be uncomfortable. It's very important that you're super comfortable at all times in this game that's inherently based on tension because you're worried that your character might die, and that's what provides. It's like the gambler's thing. The thing that keeps people gambling isn't the winning, it's the losing, and it's the fear of loss. And then when you get that dopamine rush of winning and having overcome, that, like, that's what you're actually trying to strike again and again. Role-playing games, like a lot of things in life, feed off a dopamine reward response, limbic shit going on in your brain. And without tension, what are you doing? You're just sitting around having an imaginary conversation with people, pretending to be other people who aren't even humans, even though you're all very much humans. It's why I'm worried that D&D Evolution could be a metaverse thing, because then they can finally have the D&D they want, where there's no combat, nothing exciting. You're just sitting around a virtual table that looks like it's a virtual, hall built into the inside of a gigantic living oak. Whatever that end of the last house or whatever the fuck it's called in Dragonlance looks just like it, and you all got your little cartoon avatars surrounding your body, so you don't have to see your ugly fucking human faces, you can automatically have all your consent forms built into the agreements that you signed and clicked on that you didn't actually bother reading when you signed up for your Facebook Meta account.
You would know whether you checked I'm okay with spiders or not.
Yeah. Well, maybe. They could maybe like kind of be like one of those questionnaire things like they do on Twitter when they're trying to figure out with your new account what kind of content you'd like to. Are you into music? Except it's all like this weird sadistic psychological. Like, are you afraid of spiders? Are you afraid of bats? Are you afraid of murder? Like, yeah, I'm afraid, but I'm not playing a game. It's not me in there, so who cares what I'm the fuck afraid of? Whatever happened to like confrontational therapy? That your way of getting over phobias was that you have like, oh, you're arachnophobic. Well, you're gonna have to have a pet tarantula,
right,
to make yourself,
Right. I don't know if that.
Like, aren't role playing games a great way to do that? You're afraid of spiders. Well, like, let's fight an imaginary spider, and then after you've killed him with your imaginary sword and with your imaginary little halfling.
I mean, maybe. Depends on how afraid of spiders you are. I don't think people are that severely phobic that often that you actually need that on the floor. It's a real severe phobia to be that afraid of spiders that you can't say spiders or talk about them. Or
maybe like the counter push for this is to like, okay, we'll go with the consent form, and then we need to figure out like an answer matrix of if people answer this way, they're going to be a good player, and if people answer this way, they're going to be a bad player. And so someone who's saying they want to consent to a bunch of weird sexual shit but can't handle cancer and spiders, you conveniently figure out some polite way to usher them out the door, whereas the person who's like, yeah, no, I don't want my character to be getting his dick wet I'm not here to hang out with a bunch of other dudes to describe my fictional dude having sex with fictional women who are being controlled by the dude over there behind the DM screen. There's something weird about all that, and that's why I typically don't do that in my own games, because I don't want to have simulated sex with other guys.
Yeah.
In the form of elves and imaginary hookers.
And that's okay.
Is it though? Like maybe they're in the wrong. Like, maybe if this is like, if you want to have a bunch of consent forms in your files at home that people are going to see when you pass away and they're going through all your shit, about all the kind of weird kinky sex you want to have in a role-playing game, maybe you should be in the fetish community and instead be signing consent forms to be having weird kinky sex.
Be in the fetish community.
Like,
in the imaginary fetish community, whatever.
You want to pretend you're an owl person, be a fetishist furry. I'm probably sure there's probably a thing for people who like to fucking dress up as elves. But maybe Dungeons and Dragons, ages 12 and up, is not really the environment for that stuff in the first fucking place. Also, before we had looked at this, I kept saying, it's like, I know this is mostly about, like, in-game kind of stuff, but just by using the word consent, it kind of equates it to some sort of sexual thing. And then we looked at what was on there, and like a quarter of it was sex. So, like,
yeah.
But I don't know. My favorite thing on there was gaslighting. Do you have a personal favorite, a thing that you're supposed to consent that you saw on there?
Thirst.
Thirst?
Yeah.
Do they mean like the slang thirst, like they're horny?
I don't think so. I think they meant like
your character. So no desert adventures or anything where they bicycle a little too long.
Provided with water.
Your imaginary character has to have imaginary water so they don't become imaginary dehydrated.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yes.
Well, even you could have just had a glass of water a half an hour ago and be perfectly hydrated and still get thirsty.
Yeah, that's
true.
Especially under extreme conditions.
Yeah.
Well, but you don't have to tell me that, right? Like, as long as you tell me I'm hydrated.
Like, I generally
I'll feel good.
Those are the sorts of things that, like, those are the kinds of details I tend to not necessarily bring up unless the players are really hung up or you're trying to get across an extreme environment.
Right.
You don't use the cold, negative penalty rules for when it's 60 degrees, but when the characters are, like, in an Arctic environment and it's -10, then you use the penalties. Like, characters shouldn't have to worry about being properly hydrated unless, like, the whole point of the scene that they're in is they're trying to cross some impassable fucking desert and their camels are dead.
Yeah, so none of that, basically.
So,
none of that.
Yeah.
Don't do that.
No, but like I said, there's so many variables on these, and also, like, there's addendum consent forms. So, like, the basic consent form doesn't have enough stuff. It's not specific enough. So here's a bunch of extra shit for specific. Can your character eat another character's ass while fucking the other character missionary style? Like, are you allowed to own sex slaves? It's very important to me to own sex slaves in my fictional universe. What the fuck are some of you people doing? Like, this is, like, D&D doesn't have to be wholesome. It can be edgy. You can have cursing. It's fine to have some, sexuality is part of the human experience, so you can't entirely excise all trace of it. But, like, fucking A, man, this isn't Debbie Does Neverwinter,
I hope.
So, I don't know. You got anything else you want to add that you felt like you wanted to say before we wrap this up?
I mean, I don't know what people are doing that this is necessary. I don't like that it adds focus to things that you otherwise wouldn't be focusing on, particularly in the "are you okay with this" scenario. I think asking people if, there's a lot of stuff I'm not okay with that I have to do anyway.
Yeah.
I'm not okay with going to work for $7 an hour. I don't consent to that. But I have to pay my bills, so I do it.
I'm not okay with, like, all my favorite childhood properties being rebooted into oblivion, and, but
yeah,
there's
a bunch of shit. I didn't consent to that. I'm not going to consent to it, but it's happening anyway, and I need to find the best way to get through it. And walking around asking everybody, are you okay with this all the time? Well, I hope not. That's life. You're not supposed to be okay with everything.
Yeah.
And to give people the expectation that you should be happy and comfortable all the time is crazy. That's craziness. Not to say that your gaming experience should be unpleasant, but you should be on edge a good portion of the time, worried about your fictional character, but not so worried that you have a nervous breakdown if somebody in the game has cancer.
Would roller coasters be fun if they only went like half a mile an hour and were on a completely flat rail? And you're in a big comfy chair. Like, no, they're fun because there's this little risk of danger and adrenaline and tension, over the fact that, like, am I gonna get to the other side of this roller coaster alive and not be flung out?
So
You know, like,
really only be in really extreme circumstances that you would need the consent form in the first place.
Which has probably always been the case. It's just the idea that they're trying to, like, especially like trying to use social pressure to guilt trip people into using consent forms is so fucking ironic. This is what I mean about, like, you know, on paper, like, almost all my beliefs are very hard left. According to a political compass test, I'm further left than fucking Mao. And yet, a lot of people who are dressing themselves up as if they are in my political camp are, like, not at all acting at all on the principles that they are literally saying out of their mouths as they are acting in an unprincipled manner. We're gonna guilt trip everyone into consenting to using our consent laws.
I do not consent to the consent form.
Neither do I, and everyone should say no. Use movie ratings. I'm not. You should. It is important to communicate, and it is important that the people that you're trying to recruit into your play group are comfortable. So you should give them some sort of indication of what they're going to be experiencing, so they can decide for themselves if they want to experience it, and if they don't, they can fuck right off.
And they can ask questions. Are you going to have this?
Yeah,
Do
and
you do
it's
this kind of thing?
it's reasonable to make, you know, like, say they are deathly afraid of spiders, and in session 0 mention that, unless it, like, critically breaks whatever plans you had for your setting, like the main villain, the whole thing is the Spider Queen of Nod or some shit. Then you should be fine to be able to, like, avoid that, you know. You know, like, someone in your player character group just lost a family member, then, like, maybe don't make a big scene out of some NPC losing their grandma right in front of it. You know, use a little fucking discretionary human tact. You know, like, we don't have to have Wizards of the Coast swoop in and save us from ourselves with consent forms. Oh, man, there was one other thing, and I can't fucking remember it. Damn it. Oh, well. Certainly don't want to have to start all over and record this a third time in a row. So I guess, with Lady Waspinator's consent, we're going to wrap this up. Be sure to hit like and subscribe. Leave comments below. Tell me what a giant loser I am. Yell at her for marrying some weird freak like me. Be as negative as humanly possible in my comment section. Have a good one, and stay waspinated.